Conor O'Keeffe here from Everyday Athlete, where we work with everyday athletes who want to pursue their athletic goals in endurance running, strength training, physique change, and sport. In this podcast, my guests and I discuss principles, strategies, and stories that may help you in pursuit of your own athletic goals and in your life outside of that too. When I first came across your stuff, it was, I think, originally the video where you were talking about people comparing you to, say, the Irish David Goggins. And I think the second sort of instance then I came across was you running around your backyard patio for 24 hours during lockdowns. And I thought, right, combination of them two videos just made me think this is a guy I need to know more about. And then I went on to sort of do a little bit more looking at your other things of 200-mile race, the training for a marathon in 7 weeks and hitting 3 hours 38 and all these different things. And I think it's very easy for someone to say, oh, look, who's this madman doing all these things when he could be sitting at home with his feet up? What's going on there? But you've been on the other side of that as well, where you've had that so-called easy life, the job, the good job, the maybe, easier in the short term side of things, and actually ended up in a worse place in terms of feeling depressed and feeling like it wasn't fulfilling. And I wonder what, in your opinion, is going on there, where actually choosing the hard stuff and suffering more is actually led to you in a better place than, say, what some people might say is the easy life.
Yeah, I suppose first and foremost, just on that Irish David Goggins video, like, I think I made that for a bit of clickbait as well, because like a few people had said, like, you're like the Irish David Goggins to me, a handful of people had said it, and I thought it was funny as well, right? So I was like, you know what, I'll just I'll start the video with that, and it might get some controversy, so like I feel like maybe all of the things that I have done, throughout the time of me doing them, I was doing them for different reasons as well. I think I started out doing these things because I was searching for something, anything at all in life to kind of grasp onto. I kind of had that for years when I was Thai boxing. I had that one thing to fall back on of like my identity. It's like, oh, I'm a Thai boxer. I train Thai boxing 6 days a week. I fight as regularly as I can. I travel around the world to try and do this. And, everybody knew me. It was my personality, It was like, oh, Conor, he's the Thai boxing guy, isn't he? So it kind of, I was looking for something like that, but I also was looking for recognition. When I first started doing this, I was looking for that recognition of like, I wanted people to think I was tough, just like I suppose when I was fighting as well, I was getting that feedback too, because people's like, oh yeah, Jesus, Conor's, kicking heads off people or getting his head kicked in, whichever way it is, it's one or the two. And it kind of like, it masked maybe a lot of the insecurities I felt about myself, I didn't have to face the child that was still inside me, right, for ages, because I was Conor the Thai boxer. And so Conor the Thai boxer is this fucking tough as nails, fight anybody, take on any challenge kind of guy. And so when I'm in that persona, I didn't have to worry about being Conor, right? So then when I stopped Thai boxing, I got a brain injury, and I stopped Thai boxing because it really I actually continued fighting even after I got diagnosed with the brain injury, but it got to the point where I was so scared that I was going to end up dead, or I was going to end up with a long-lasting, really bad brain injury, that I just like, look, I have to stop. And then I kind of fell apart. And I just, because once I didn't have the guise of Conor, the Thai boxer, to protect the child Conor in me, he had to figure out another way of distracting himself. And that was usually through drinking and partying and smoking and doing all this shit, And so when I kind of exhausted that part and I had gotten to the point where I was like, fuck it, man, like I was thinking about killing myself on almost a weekly basis, right? Just to, sorry if there's anybody who's experienced suicidal ideation who was listening, right? Because it does get better. If you seek you seek out things that can make it better, you'll get better. And so I had that time, and I kind of had that chat with myself one morning that I was like, right, if you don't change and do something, like you won't see the next year. Like, you know, that's the way I was kind of framing it for myself. And it just so happened to be running, because I ran a lot when I was boxing. Like, call it road work, do your road work, like, you know, go running, and it kind of toughens up the bones and stuff like that. And it helps you with the cardio, our aerobic base. And then you mix that up then with your, you know, your pads, your bag work, sparring, clinching, all that kind of stuff, right? So I always had a kind of an affinity for running. I was always the first back, you know, whenever we did the group run, like we do the same 6K loop up around Cork City, like, you know, and I'd always be the first home, or one of the first home. Fucking some of the lads were absolute animals of runners as well, like, you know. And it was great. It was really competitive, and it was like, you know, it was one of those things where no matter what level of fighter you were, you could always compete with the running, you know. And I just enjoyed it. So I kind of just said, look, I'll run a marathon, and then it kind of spiraled from there, because like, one, it was something to tell people I was doing. So I was happy out to have something to say about myself that was half interesting. Two, it gave me a bit of an outlet, a physical outlet to be an athlete again, which I was kind of enjoying. I think on a subconscious level, like, exercise has that ability to give us that even keel. It should never be the medicine, but it can be maybe the gateway to a thought process that changes, you know, the way you think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what kind of happened then. And then I just started to, I kind of realized, like, I was like, look, I can take a lot of punishment, right? So that kind of came from the Thai boxing background. It's a really brutal sport, like, you know, and I could take an awful lot of punishment in that. And so I just used that to my advantage, like, you know, because I'm genetically inept. Like, I'm long, my limbs are long. I don't have a great running style. I just had surgery on my hip because there was bones growing where there shouldn't be bones growing, and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not genetically, you know, built to be doing all these stuff, but I do think that I have an ability to maybe find perspective when I am in a tough situation. I'm like, right, okay. Like, even I was on the TV show Hell Week, you know, and there was lots of lads that were on that were like Adonises, you know, you just take the top off, like they could have been on the cover of fucking, you know, Optimum Nutrition ads and stuff, you know. And I just felt like, you know, if anybody had seen me, they wonder, like, this guy's gone. 20 minutes, this guy will be gone. And I ended up finishing it. But I think that was more so because I was able to find perspective in times when, you know, and just give myself another hour. You know, I was like, I'll give it another hour, I'll give it another hour, and just repeat that cycle over and over again. So that's where it is. It started off like that, and then I found that the more I dug into the physical, that the mental shone out, and it started to make me realize that I was actually thinking in a very negative way for as long as I could remember, for my whole life, just going in on myself, talking terribly to myself, and always giving myself a really, really hard time. And once I pegged that, and this is the thing, right? You just don't know. You don't realize how badly you're talking to yourself, and we do it on a daily basis. You know, we talk about it on a daily basis. Like, you know, it's just. And so what I decided was I was going to be, instead of being my own worst enemy, my own best friend. And I'd say people are sick of hearing me say that, like, at this stage, because that's as simple as I can put it, is like, what I have found as more transformative than running or exercise or anything like that is just the way I speak to myself. If I can speak to myself in a good way, that's what leads to the external stuff happening, the running, the training, all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talked about that, the medicine aspect of it, but it not being the thing that I suppose is your only way of dealing with whatever issues you're having. And it's an interesting balance, because I would very much be a proponent of similar ideas around using your training as a method of self-development, I suppose, and as a method of recognizing those aspects of self-talk and negative thoughts that are that you need to deal with. And the danger, I think, within that then is probably the going to the point where that's the only thing you have, and you're relying on that training to the point where it becomes your complete persona and your complete identity, I suppose. And maybe that's where you'd fell short previously with the kickboxing, that it was probably the only thing that was holding you back, or that was your identity, and there maybe wasn't that other aspect to it. And I wonder, once the running came into play, and maybe as you progressed through that running journey, have you been able to manage that in a way where that has become a method towards self-development without it becoming that complete identity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, like this is the thing, right? I the perfect example of it has been the last 9 months of my life, right? Because I haven't been running. I might have
Mm.
ran a total about 50 kilometers, I'd say, since December of last year. And that's because obviously my hip had just come to the point where like there was points where I could have like I like to say they're like lucid moments, right? I'm like I'm Conor, you know, and I can run, and the hip isn't to the point where it's stopping me from doing anything. And then I can sometimes have like 6 months of that, and it just never does. And then one day I wake up and it just blows up, and it just stays like that for months, right? So that had been happening for 5 years, you know. So like what I've realized, even as a coach as well, and I know that there are lots of people that come to me for coaching and are looking to do something within this, that I try as a coach to not only develop people as a runner, but develop their relationship with running. Right? Running is there to add to our lives. It's not there to take away. It's not there as a crutch. We are good people without being a runners, and without smashing PBs or running these distances. And that's what I try and instill in people is like, you know, we as human beings, very short memories, right? So like, we think, oh geez, I'm after missing 3 days of training this week now. No, the whole thing's gone to shit. I'm like, what about the 8 weeks prior where you're just hitting every single session? Is that all gone down the bin? And that's the thing about all, and that's what I feel about me when I had to take the time off running, and the reason why I was able to keep such an even keel mood wise. And you know yourself, now you've a child, and you have your business, and you have a wife, and you have everything going on in life that can stress you, right? It can add such beauty, but it can also be a stressful thing. And just trying to almost rise above what I'm thinking about myself in my own running journey, and just kind of living life has actually been so beautiful. To live life without without that thing you do, and just realize that actually life is fucking great. Life is great. Yes, it's class when you're able to run, and it's unreal. I love running, and I'm fucking dying to start running now again. Like even after the surgery, right? I 3 more weeks to wait before I can even start doing it, right? But I feel like that's one thing that I would say to anybody that's a runner that's listening to this podcast is life is great with running, life is great without it. And yes, you might love the mental release, the space that you get from running, but the other part of life, it's kind of one of those things where you're like, am I running from something or to something? What's the kind of internal driver for this? And I always say this to people, like, I struggled with weight when I was younger. When I was a young fella, like up until I was about 15, I was quite chubby, and then I started to lose weight. Now I grew about a foot as well in about a year, right? So it was things. So I always say to people, like, when I was trying to lose weight, I was going to the gym and I was dieting, but I was doing it from a place of hate. Right? I was doing it from a place of loathing the way I was looking right now. And now when I go to the gym and when I go to train, I do it from a place of love. I'm like, Conor, you deserve to go and train and to see what your body is capable of. You deserve to see your potential be realized, And so I feel like that's something that I would say to people about, their relationship with exercise, and their relationship with that is it can be as powerful as any drug. And it can be as addictive as any drug. And I feel like if we can have a proper handle on it and a proper hold on it, it can be so useful. And I say, like, about, Mike Tyson says this about fear, right? He says fear is like fire. It can be so, so useful It can keep us warm. It can cook our food. It can do all of these things for us, but fire can also destroy us, right? It can also burn our house down, right? So I feel like that's the thing with anything. Is like, is this fire in me helping me, or is this fire destroying me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I feel like that's the conversation I've had to have with myself as well, you know.
That's very interesting, because the culmination of what you were saying there, firstly around the doing stuff out of love versus hate, and also actually the fear element, just made me think about something that I heard about before around when someone has like a phobia or a fear of something. A common approach to that would be exposure therapy, where they'll be introduced to watered down aspect of whatever it is they're fearing. So if they're fear of flying, maybe instead of going onto a plane, they go and watch planes taking off at an airport one day or whatever it is. But if that exposure therapy is done without that person doing it voluntarily, it can actually have that negative effect. So say if someone was to just drop them off at an airport and not tell them where they're going and make them watch planes, it could actually make that fear worse. Whereas if they're going and volunteering it and actually going up to the point where they're comfortable or slightly beyond it, but they're the ones making the choice, that's actually curative as opposed to making it worse. And so I think that's interesting as well about with our training and the feeling, even if it's not involuntary, the feeling that we're not doing it voluntary, the feeling we're doing it out of a need to do it, rather than where it feels like, or it sounds like you're at now, where you haven't been able to do the thing. So therefore, what you do from here is voluntary, and it's been able to say, I'm actually doing this out of my own choice now. And the inevitable suffering that comes along with it will actually be seen nearly as a positive rather than a negative that it might have been seen previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of growth to be found in both, in training and being, giving yourself to the daily process, and also kind of taking that step back. I think there's growth in both,
Yeah. Do you think the aspect where you found that growth in pursuing these things is unique to, say, yourself and people like yourself, and I would include myself within that, who have that way of being? Or do you feel that almost everyone can benefit from some aspect of putting themselves in those positions, whether that be through running or, say, another form of exercise that's going to make them confront those things?
Yeah, I feel like, if we're talking about our lives, right, they're very long for us. Our conscious beings, our consciousness as human beings sees of 100 years as a long time, right? So we're here for a long time. Whether the world has been here for 13 billion years, we think we're here for a long time, for 100 years, and it seems that way to us, right? So if we're here for a long time, anything that is very quick, very easy, very expedient, very much instant pleasure is very unlikely. I'm not going to say is not, because there might be those people out there that are just pleasure seekers, and they have had a fulfilling life doing that. And that's fair enough. I feel like I get a different type of pleasure from what I do, right? So I'll come back to that point in a minute. But when we do things that are expedient and quick, like drink alcohol, very fun activity to do. Right? We've all done it, and we've all had a great crack. And Irish people have that kind of culture to it of like drinking and partying and stuff like that, right? Taking drugs, again, look, loads of fun, and it can, it make great time and all that kind of stuff. Being promiscuous, can be very fun at that time, and gives you that kind of boost of good mood chemicals and all that kind of stuff, right? So those things. Gambling, another thing I haven't gotten into, but have been exposed to people that are in recovery from gambling, because I've been kind of outspoken about certain struggles in my life. I've come across lots of people that have had issues with gambling, and this is that thing. It gives that boost. It rises you from the base level. Your base level of the walking around corners that we have here for us gets elevated, and so we chase that. We're not chasing the big win. We're not chasing what's in the bank account. I would imagine if you asked any gambler what the biggest thrill was, it wasn't their biggest win. It was, it was a time when they thought they weren't going to win and they did. Maybe they won a tenner. But it's they could have won 25 grand on a sure thing. But I feel like their biggest thing would be that, so that's what they're actually chasing, right? I would imagine. Addiction and especially gambling addiction would be my area, but I'm just kind of spitballing. But so what I feel like is anytime I found myself in that time where I'm relying on drink, drugs, sex, all of that for my validation, for my self-worth, for my being, was the time when I felt the lowest. Right? Because you can't have enough, and there's always a come down, and there's always reality hits. And so when I realized that, I feel like human beings elevated themselves above the animal kingdom almost through struggle, because we don't have claws, we don't have big teeth, we don't have fur that covers us and keeps us from the cold. We had to struggle to find our way in the world where we're going to get an advantage. And so I feel like that's innate in us. So we have to have that type of stimulus for us to grow, right? And that's my opinion. And I feel like a lot of people are going to think, fair enough, that's cool, you can say whatever. And I'm sure that other people will be like, I love going on my holidays and stuff. That's great, that's fantastic. That's not what I'm actually talking about. Like, I go on my holidays with my fucking wife and my son too, and we go to the sun and we play on the beach and we drink, fizzy drinks, and we do that, and we go out and we have a few glasses of wine or all that stuff. I'm not saying that's bad, but what I'm saying is just the reliance on that for happiness is where I think it's dangerous. Not that it's bad, I think it's dangerous, because it just leaves you open to the point where you're chasing something that is just not going to give you that feedback again. So I think anybody could benefit from what I'm doing, from what I would purport. So not necessarily that they have to go run ultramarathons, but maybe that they just challenge themselves. So for instance, I work with a lot of clients as well in terms of, I've labeled it as mindset coaching, but it's really just coaching of any description, right? But I've worked with a lot of men actually, right? And some of their challenges are actually speaking up for themselves or not being bossed around, right? Which is something that, like, lots of lads that might have had sisters or had strong mother figures in their house would have had this thing of, oh, I'm going to do what I'm told, be a good boy, and then they're not able to present themselves in a kind of an authoritative way in life, right? So then their challenge or their discomfort comes from that time when they want to present their autonomy, and they want to say what's on their mind, and they want to say, no, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be a yes man. I'm not going to just do what you're saying because I don't feel like that's right. That's their challenge. That's their idea of discomfort. So it doesn't have to fit all molds. So whatever you think is uncomfortable, like, I'm sure that they're like, even speaking to female clients is about how they're perceived is something that stops them from moving forward. Some women don't want to present themselves because they don't want to be seen as bossy. Some other people then as well, they don't want to show, some other women don't want to show their soft side because they don't want to be seen as a soft woman. They want to be presenting themselves in this type of way. So the challenge is not trying to fit the mold. It's trying to figure out what they feel best. It is more speaking towards who they are, right? That's their challenge. And so, whatever the challenge is, it doesn't necessarily have to be running, it doesn't have to be gym, it doesn't even have to be a physical exertion. It could just be something that you find that, do you know what, my life would improve if I was able to challenge myself to do this thing. Then I think that's worthwhile.
Yeah. The contrast of the two types of things you're talking about there, time span actually comes into it sounds like as well, because like the likes of the gambling and the drinking and everything else, they're all very short term, and that that up that you're getting in pursuit of these things, whether it's, watching the horse race for that goes on maybe 5 minutes, or drinking for the couple of hours that it lasts. They're all things that are great in that moment, but they're so short term. Whereas something like running your first marathon, or addressing those issues of being able to speak up for yourself, they're all things that take so long. So the pursuit of those, the pursuit, which you're saying is where the actual gratification is so much longer, that it's sustained, and it might be less intense,
Nail
but
on
it's
the
more
head.
sustained over time. And even with
Because it's
that,
not the marathon. It's not
yes,
running the marathon.
yeah.
It's the
If you were
pursuit
to
of
go
it.
if you were to go out and run a marathon tomorrow after no training, it's a completely different thing than someone who's spent 6 months running for training for a marathon. Because that person remembers the 6 months, not just
Mm.
the
They
marathon.
might not. I didn't.
Okay.
First time I ran my marathon, I thought I'd cross the line and I'd feel this euphoria, and I
Mm.
would feel this, my life is fixed. And it didn't happen. So if there is somebody who's training hard for 6 months for a marathon and is expecting this life-changing ordeal to happen,
Mm.
you go to sleep that night, you wake up, and it's a new day, and there's nothing fucking special about it, right? So I said on my story this morning, right, because I had seen a buddy of mine had a great success. He's in the filmmaking industry, and he worked on the Kneecap movie, actually, right? And he had and that's obviously blowing up, and it's a great success. And I was just kind of patting him on the back today, and I just get this huge warm feeling when somebody I know does something does something that's good in their lives, right, or has a success, because I know the hard work it takes to get to do anything tough in your life takes an awful lot of sacrifice. But what I actually said was, the hard work, you might not see the payoff tomorrow, you might not see the payoff next week, and you might not see the payoff next year. But what often you'll come to realize is the work is the payoff. The work is the payoff. The ability to the privilege to be able to put your effort into something, and to have that is absolutely incredible, right? To just have that ability to put something into whatever you think you want to do, that's the payoff, So sorry, I'm cutting across you here now, but it's just I just add.
No, it is that thing of setting up yourself with the goals, but not having that expectation. There was a sort of quote that I'd read one time. I think I'd read it, or else it came into my head because I haven't been able to find a source for it. But it was something along the lines of, at first, the goal justifies the work, and at the end, the work justifies having set the goal. So essentially saying that you need the goal to get you to do the things along the way. But once you've actually gotten to that goal, you hopefully realize, or at some point will realize, actually that goal is just there to get you to do the work, because the work is what was important. And what the potential to happen is, I'm sure you've heard the concept of gold medal syndrome as well, where, it's that thing of build up for 4 years, say at the Olympics, and then you have the best week of your life celebrating a gold medal afterwards, and then there's this a big massive drop off that can come for a lot of athletes. I wonder, for you, with these things that you're doing, have you felt that previously? And so it's like maybe with the marathon it was something similar to that, but have you found ways of actually setting yourself up that you're not experiencing that, or is that inevitable and you maybe come up with ways of managing your mentality around that?
Mm. Yeah, for sure. At the beginning, like as I said there, when I first did my first marathon, like I crossed the line, and I went out drinking that night, like woke up hungover and bits the next day, like, and just hadn't any idea of how I was going to make it last any longer.
Mhm.
And so I feel like it was actually when I realized about how terrible I was treating myself, that that was following me through in the marathon training, right? And
Mhm.
following me through in anything really, that it was once I addressed that's when I started to realize that regardless of what I do, I'm a good person. I'm kind, I'm genuine, I'm flawed, as well. Absolutely. I don't do everything perfectly. I'm not a perfect person, but I can accept myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the turning point to where I was like, right, if the things I do on the outward are just a manifestation of the inward thought, right? So like, I feel like even from doing, the 32 marathons in 32 days and things like that, there was no come down off that. And I've spoken to some friends of mine, super successful in the sphere of ultra running, actually far better ultra runners than I am, right? And have had huge successes and have really had spiraling downward kind of trajectory after those wins. Mm-hmm. And I really do, I do kind of want to think like what happens, in that sphere. And I feel like it is that element of, perhaps, not saying that these particular people that I'm talking about have this thought, but the way I thought about it was, my life's supposed to get better now.
Mm-hmm.
My life's supposed to get better now. I did this unreal thing. My life's supposed to get 10 times better, whatever that is. I don't know what it is, monetarily, maybe I'm going to get more respect. I'm going to get, I'm going to be seen in a better light. My life's going to get better. I never have that expectation anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an expectation attached to the things that I do anymore. And it's not that I'm a great person because I don't have that. It's that I feel like, regardless of what I do, I'm a good dad, I'm a good husband, I'm a good person. Me, myself, just being is a good thing. Mm-hmm. So if I go out there and I do the runs, the marathon, if I run the length of Ireland, right, that's the next thing that I'm going to do next year. If I run the length of Ireland record time, that's brilliant. But if I honestly put the work in every day and just enjoy the process, and like it's a year's training, it'll take 3 days to do it, hopefully, only 3 days. So if I'm waiting for payoff for 3 days for a year's work, the maths just doesn't make sense, like, to me, right? So like the maths to me have to make sense. And within that year, I have my own standards then as well of myself, not just for training as a runner, but as a father, as a husband, as a partner to my wife, as a friend, as a son. I have my own standards. So I want to maintain my standards as best as possible, spend time with my son, spend time with my wife, make sure that my family is looked after, spend time with my parents when I go down to Cork and enjoy that time with them. We never guaranteed anything in life, so I always try to think about it in that way. It's like, time is precious. And so I want to be the best person I can be during that time. And if I can do that, then that's all I want to do, for me to, look myself in the face when I'm going to bed at night and go, John, you fucking did what you could. You did what you could. So yeah, I think there's a lot of times where people will have an expectation attached to what may happen after they finish something or do something, and I completely understand where a lot of people are coming from, where they get to that point, and it's like, as you said, that gold medal syndrome of, this piece of metal is great, but like, they cut they had something to fight for, they had something to fight for 4 years. That just fucking was just like driving them and maybe, bringing them to a fucking place in their mind that they never even thought they could get to.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get there. And it's like, what happens to the dog that finally catches the car? It's, so yeah. And that's the human struggle, like, so I think it a lot of these things on our ability to react to what happens comes from childhood. Some way that we experience childhood is what will inform how we experience things in adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So, perhaps maybe your parents never gave you a pat on the back, never told you that you were, that they were proud of you. They never told that they loved you. And so then we're going to seek that as an adult. Then we're going to seek it from other people, maybe, right? Or something like that to that regard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, there's even certain elements of that are dictating my life to this day that I might not even be aware of, right? But I feel like what I have decided, because I used to meta-analyze the meta-analysis of my life, right? I used to get deep. And now I realize that, you know what, Conor? If you're happy and you're okay and you're content with your life, it doesn't matter sometimes where they're coming from. And my mom is a psychotherapist, right? My mother is a psychotherapist. So she said to me, she was like, we have this term, defense mechanisms,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she says, people think that that's such a bad thing. It's such a dirty word, right? Defense mechanism, right? It's such a dirty word because we developed those defense mechanisms for hundreds of thousands of years to help us survive. And we do it now to this day. So a lot of these defense mechanisms that we come up with just allow us to cope. They just allow us to cope, and that's the thing, man. It's like, I have defense mechanisms and I have things that I fall back on to this day, and they stay with me. And as long as I'm able to, as I said, be that person that I want to be within that, I'm happy with that. If I start nitpicking myself and try to be perfect all the time, it just, I don't think I'll be able to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard someone, they were talking about, I can't remember exactly what they were talking about, but they were saying basically, I think it was, I'm not someone who's massively religious or anything, but I think it was maybe just, I'd seen someone was talking about, like a pastor was talking about people criticizing religion by saying it's a crutch, but he was saying, well, sometimes people need crutches. Say when you break your leg, you need that crutch. So it's not to say that a crutch is necessarily a bad thing, or these defense mechanisms are a bad thing. It's sometimes you need them. Sometimes you need a defense mechanism. If you had a football team that had only an offensive aspect and didn't have a defense, well, you'd be saying, where's the defense? So yeah, before we get into just the next challenge that you have, one aspect I've noticed about both your challenges and just your content, I suppose, in general, is that aspect of creativity to it. Someone who's interested in art and stuff like that myself, I've noticed that even with the likes of the symbolism of the 32 counties in 32 days, or 32 marathons in 32 counties in 32 days, and dropping, with the 32-pounded weight vest and dropping a pound each day, and the symbolism of that, but also even just the aesthetic of your videos and the effort that I know you must put into different things like that, and the documentation of the different things. I wonder how much and how important that aspect of theatre and telling the story and aesthetics is to what you do.
Yeah, Jesus, no, I can't, right? I've done loads of these podcasts, and that's a really, really fucking great and profound question, man. That's one that's kind of like, Jesus, yeah. Kind of flies over your head sometimes, because you don't think about it as much, you just do, but 100%, like the art of storytelling, like I think is something that goes back for millennia for Irish people, right? The idea of bards and stuff like that, and this thought that like bards and storytellers in Ireland were amazing because we had the most potent psilocybin mushrooms, growing in the mountains and stuff, and how these bards would take these mushrooms and have these visions and then come up with these stories. And I love the stories of like this is a perfect example. Like my son and your son both called Cuan, and I actually wanted to call him Cuchulainn. So I wanted to call him fully Cuchulainn, right? That was going to be his actual name. My wife didn't bite, right? So I was like, what about Cuan? And the reason why is because I love the story of Setanta and how he became Cuchulainn and all of these things, right? So when I talk about these things, it's like I feel like I want what I'm looking for whenever I'm talking to online is like I'm sitting down having a coffee with you, like I'm talking to you, and because I know that there are certain times in my life where maybe I've heard something and I've resonated with it, and I felt like that person was talking to me, and I thought that was the most powerful thing, just to sit down and feel like I'm in a conversation with someone, even though I'm just listening to them speak. And there is that element of, you know, my life, I want my life to be my masterpiece, right? So when I leave, all of the things that I've done have been the brush strokes of that masterpiece. And like one of the biggest brush strokes I've ever done is becoming a dad, right? So like it's not just my own selfish endeavors of running these runs and stuff, but it's more so like my son's first word was moon, and I have a moon tattooed on my hand here, right? And it's like, it's right next to, it's on my hand where my GPS watch is. Right? So every time I check my watch that I'm gonna, you know, when I'm running, I see that and I realize that, you know, regardless of what happens or what it says on that watch, I have this guy that, you know, I have a duty to be the best person that I can be for him, right? So yeah, the idea of symbolism, the idea of art is right there on my hand, like, you know. So it follows me through my day, and I love the power of words. And I write a lot. I like to write in a very simplistic way. You won't see very, you know, flowery language sometimes coming out on my page, but you'll see something that's just explained in a very simple way a lot. And I feel like that is the best way for me to portray a message, is to say it in a way that I would like for it to be said to me. So when I do the challenge, like I already have, and this is maybe like the cat out of the bag here, but I already have the idea of like of what I'm going to do, just as a symbolic thing for the run of Ireland, that I wanted to get the green, white, and gold dyed into my hair. And I've played around with that idea now for the last week, and I'm like, do you know what? I think that could be pretty cool. And do you know what? Regardless of whether I ever achieve any of these things, this is the thing as well that people always say to me, you're so ballsy, by you know, you say these things out, like, you know, even when I did talking about the 32 weighted marathons, I had fucking no clue whether I was going to be able to do it or not, but I'm going to say it out and say it into the world and try and show, like, be fearless about what you want to do, you know. Even recently, I said, you know, I'm talking about running the record of Ireland. I've had loads of people that have come out and try to tear me down, not just say that I'm not going to complete it, but actually tear me down as a person. And I'm like, that's okay. I feel like if you ever do put yourself out there and you ever want to try and achieve something that somebody else deems is impossible, perhaps they haven't opened their mind in that way before, right? And they haven't said it. So I feel like saying things is a really powerful thing. And I said it outright a million times, like I had to postpone Project 32, the 32 marathons, twice. And I knew both times when I was postponing it that this was a postponement, not a negating of the whole idea. So that idea of theatre and the idea of storytelling is huge. And it's without even me even knowing, until you've kind of brought it into my consciousness here now. Yeah. Because people don't necessarily they don't resonate with achievement. There's some woman or man in the country who's in their late 50s or in their early 60s, or is, you know, or some guy who's 17 or 18, and he's seeing this and he's going, I'm not going to be able to run the length of the country. But this guy fucking said it outright a million times that he's going to try and do this thing. And he's stood on top of, you know, the platform of the social media page, and has said, like, I don't have any fear over it. I don't fear the failure. I don't fear the success. I just do. That is what I want to resonate with people, is not the achievement of this thing or the failure of this thing, right? Because I could fail, absolutely. It is, be fearless in whatever that means to you. And I've already covered it before. It's not just about running or ultra running or whatever. It's being fearless, whether that's like reconnecting with somebody that you haven't talked to in a while and building and rebuilding that bridge, or it's, you know, putting yourself forward for that position in work, you know, and putting yourself out there and presenting yourself. that's the fucking spice of life, you know, in my estimation, you know. So
And
great question, Conor. Just really appreciate it, man.
do you know
It's got
what's
me thinking.
it's probably because it's something personally that I've maybe struggled with in terms of, I'm always trying to put context of modern day into sort of evolutionary history and ask myself what role in society is social media playing that would have been in historic times, and maybe just based on what you're saying, as I'm asking the question and as you're answering, I'm thinking actually social media might just be the storytelling aspect, or could be used as the storytelling aspect of what it would have been for millennia, the bards and the storytellers and the scribes. And we have the opportunity to use the social media as our way of doing that, because realistically, very seldom in life are we sitting down around a campfire and telling stories of um, impressive figures of the time and everything. So there's part of it where we have to do that nearly ourselves now. And if we're going to do things, we have to be the storytellers about ourselves. And that's something I probably struggle with, because it feels in one way egoic to be sharing yourself and putting your journey out there as if, who am I to be doing this? But also for me, actually, I think the ego is actually holding me back from doing that. Not wanting to be perceived as that is actually a form of maybe ego in itself. So as your answer, I'm thinking to myself, actually, I have to find a way of doing what you're talking about, of using it as a platform for storytelling, as a way of allowing other people to see that journey and take the lessons where they're applicable to them. So yeah, that's an interesting thing, an interesting aspect of it.
Before I move on there, right? Do you
Right.
remember the movie Coach Carter?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a very poignant part in that film when the character
Yeah.
Timo Cruz, and he states, like, what we fear most is not that we are inadequate, but we fear most that we are powerful beyond measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've twisted and turned that so many different times and thought about it and thought, what is the crux of that? And one of the things that I've pulled out is what we're actually afraid of is not that we can't do something. What we're actually afraid of is our potential. We're afraid of the potential. And I think one of the things that caught me a couple of years ago was I have the potential, and now it is my duty to make it come about, right? So it is the cross to bear as well. Because when you discover your potential, there is always going to be something in the back of your mind that's knocking on that door that says, what are we doing? What are we doing? You're meant to be doing this. So yeah, I definitely feel like I don't want to be self-involved, but I think it's a line to thread. But I also feel like I can't be unimportant to myself either. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's that balancing act.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that was something that I never understood about that quote until more recently. Was that aspect of when the reason that you sort of fear, what people say, fear success or fear different things like that, rather than failure, is because you then realize you have the ability to do something and now you're on the hook for it. And also probably a fear that actually if you achieve these things and push for these things, you're going to have to uphold that new standard to yourself. And that's probably as much of a fear as actually failing is. Now I'm going to have to live up to my promise and to my previous standard. Right. I'm aware of time as well, and I want to get on to the current challenge of running the length of Ireland, coming from a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago getting hip surgery. And I think the record at the minute is something like 3 days, just over 3 days.
3 days, 1 hour and 55 minutes, I believe.
You have it down there too. That's the A set on it. And I'm going to leave this one open ended. I want to know why you're doing this one.
I thought about doing this for a long time, right? There's one fairly simple dimension to it, is that I think it actually plays into my strengths, right? I'm not very fast, right? And like I can be fast enough. Like I've got a fast 5K, not an unofficial 5K. Like, you know, I ran 16:55 for 5K, and I think that's, you know, that's what I would deem as fast for me, right? But and I'm proud of it. Like, you know, I enjoy that aspect. But what actually I think is my strength is when you get into the really long stuff. That's what I feel is my strength. So yeah, I'm playing to my strengths, right? And at the same time, I look at it and I go, I'm after hip surgery 3 weeks ago. I'm hardly playing into my strengths right now. But that's again, the point you made about theatre and storytelling is I literally wanted to announce my most lofty goal at my lowest moment. Like the anesthetic hadn't worn off, and I was actually on the phone telling everybody that I'm going to run the length of Ireland that day next year. And that's, again, yeah, maybe it is this idea of story. Well, it definitely is. It's exactly what I thought about was, yeah, I was like, I want to show people that, like, because it's super, like, to everybody that knows ultra running and knows what the distance is and knows these things, completely counted me out. Absolutely. And they probably rightfully so, right? If you think about it, right? I'm just after having major surgery on my hip, right? And then I can't run for 6 weeks. So that's already 6 weeks eating into my year, like, you know, to prepare for this thing. But it isn't about that. It's not necessarily about, I would way prefer to dance with fear and success than to have a certainty of success, right? At all times. I feel like it pushes me to different limits and to different kind of mental edge, which happens months before I even set foot on the journey, right? What actually it happens, your self-belief gets checked so many times along the road to doing these things that you have to become resilient and you have to become tough. And that's what I say about toughness. Toughness is not just your ability to run for long periods of time, or, you know, go sleep deprivation, or go on for so and so hours. Toughness is your ability to contain your own mind as well, and to speak to yourself when the kind of the chips are down, right? And, you know, what actually, and only recently I've had a lot of people come out of the woodwork that have said you have no chance of doing this and all this kind of stuff. And do you know what? That's okay. I don't harbor anything against these people like that that say that. It's just that I feel like I should be just treated as a runner, and I don't think that me as Conor should come into question here, which has, right? So like that's where I draw the line with these people. Like, you know, if it's being disrespectful, I'm not about that. If it's being sharing an opinion that I'm not going to do the run as a runner, that's fine. But you have to be able to take those things. You have to be able to take those doubts and those people that are going to hate on you, and it
would be an incomplete story without that.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and they might have the last laugh. I might fall flat in my face. That's okay. It's, frankly, and excuse my French, I don't give a shit about what they think. I'm going to just go do it anyway. And what I can control is how I prepare for it and how I run it. And so I can't control what they say or what they do. You know, I can't say, you know, I can't control those things. But what I can control is what I do, who I am in the here and now. So, yeah, so the why aspect of it is that element of, it's probably one of the most mental things I could think of to do within 12 months of having hip surgery as well, right? Because again, all of these things, just like the losing the pound every day, of like losing the weight of the mental struggles that I was going through over that time, and sharing that weight with my dad, you know, passing him the pound every day so he could put it into the box, you know, and it would be gone. It's the same thing. It's like, it doesn't matter where you are now, and it doesn't matter where you start. It's where you've pointed the compass and where you want to go. And that's that's the thing. Like, you know, people think, and I've said this to myself, it's like my life is fucked, you know, or my life is ruined, or whatever. So many times catastrophizing things when I was in my 20s and stuff. And I look at it now and I go, Jesus, it was just a bad couple of weeks. You know, it was a bad couple of weeks. So no matter who you are, if you're listening to this, doesn't matter where you are right now, you have so much power to change where you want to go and how you want to treat yourself and how you want to view yourself and how you want to take on the future. So that's the message, really, is that it doesn't matter where you come from or whatever it is. And the amount of people that have said to me is like, you've done nothing to prove that you're going to be able to do this run. And I'm like, that's okay. I don't need to do that. All I need to do is prove it on the day. Right. So, yeah. So like that's, I'm enjoying it, you know, I'm enjoying the hate, you know, I'm enjoying that, because I used to be like those people. I used to see people doing something, putting their neck out, saying things and going about them and doing them and you know, trying to be successful. And because I wasn't doing it, or I felt like I was unfulfilled in some way, I would hate on them, and I would say, sure, he's only able to do that now because of this, or he's only able to do that now because he's got loads of money, or he's only able to do that now because his dad does this, right? Instead of just seeing somebody for the success that they are, and enjoying that for them, you know what I mean? And like, I feel like I've gotten to the point now where my friend has a success, I'm jumping around the fucking room, you know, and I'm so, it's almost like I'm feeling it, like, you know, I get that fucking feeling in my chest, like, you know, when your son says something to you or does something, or, you know, a thing, and you get that feeling. It's like that when I hear about my friend who's, Jesus, you know, my friend got promoted there a couple of weeks ago. He's like, I went from a level 3 to a level 5 within his organization. Jesus Christ, big hug for him. And I could live in that success because I know him and I know what he's done, you know? And so that's that element is like, those people that are hating on me are actually being robbed of that. They're being robbed of being happy for somebody. So like, that's what I feel is so powerful about this, is like, perhaps we can turn those haters into somebody who actually enjoy me doing this thing, you know, and if not, I don't care either, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's always going to be that aspect to it, and yeah, it makes a part of the story is that if you didn't have anyone who was doubting you, you'd probably be thinking to yourself, actually, this probably isn't challenging enough. It's not, you know, and part of what you're doing is challenging people's preconceptions about what is possible. So there are always going to be people who are on that other side of it. Yeah, just on the actual now, this goal, what do you foresee as being your biggest potential obstacles coming up within the journey? And have you plans of how you get over those?
Yeah, the biggest kind of, like, I do an awful lot of help with people, like with businesses and with individuals on goal setting, right? So the idea of like, okay, so you have this is a perfect example. Now, this is like, you know, a blueprint of kind of how I go about all of these things. So like, I'm currently in phase 2 of training, right? So like, in my mind, it makes perfect sense, right? But so what you have is your dream goal, right? So my dream goal is to run the length of Ireland record time. That's my dream goal. Underneath that, you have a performance goal, right? And then underneath a performance goal, you have a process goal. Now, I don't want those to just be some words that I've just spat out, so I'll explain them, right? So a performance goal is, so the dream goal is maybe something that's vague, or maybe something that is quite lofty, right? The example I use with businesses an awful lot is a sprinter that wants to be the fastest sprinter in Ireland, right? Mm-hmm. That's very vague, because we don't know when he wants to do it. We don't know what time that actually takes. And we don't know how many other competitors are looking to do the same thing. We don't know anything, right? So it's very vague. So his, let's say, performance goal, for example, would be to shave 0.10 of a second off of his 100-meter time. So that's his performance goal. That's a performance goal that helps inform him as to how achievable the dream goal is. Mm-hmm. Underneath the performance goal, he'll have his process goals. So the process goals is, what does he do on the monthly, weekly, daily basis to get him to that point. So the process goal is, let's say, I want to do 3 track sessions a week. And then we get more specific again. I want to do those 3 track sessions on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And we get more specific again and again and again. And so what we're looking to do is to draw specificity out of a vague goal, right? So in my goal here with running this is like one of the biggest challenges you're going to face with a goal that takes a long time. So a year is actually a long goal, right? So there has to be goals between that goal. So my next goal is just to start running. So my next goal is to run 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and I'll do that 5 times. So that's the next kind of parameter. So what do I do in that time, right? So that's my performance goal. The performance goal is run 5 minutes on, 5 minutes, 1 minute on, 1 minute off for 5 minutes each, right? So how do I get to that? So in that regard, I have to build up my kind of cardiovascular ability and, my muscles as best I can and recuperate the hip. So I've built up my time on the stationary bike. I built up my time on the elliptical. I built up my time on the swim. So I've done those things to help me so that when I reach the point of my goal, I should have a good chance of achieving it, right? So the biggest problem is consistency. So how do we remain consistent and not peak before our peak time? Because when you have a lot of time, because 1 year is a lot of time and not a lot of time to do this, but there's a lot of time there for things to go right, and there's a lot of times for things to go wrong. So if I would say this to anybody that has a goal that's quite long is, you have to break it down into smaller goals. And that's one of the biggest things that will help stop you from peaking early or from kind of running yourself into the ground, overtraining or making too many leaps too quickly. So that's why it's very much about having those different phases in your mind, right? So phase 1 for me was just getting on the stationary bike, getting things going. The first part of phase 1 was getting off crutches. So I was off crutches in 6 days. So that was another kind of element to it, right? And then the end of phase 1 was having 30 minutes on the stationary bike. That's when phase 1 ended, because that was the goal of phase 1. So the goal of phase 2 now is to get to the point where I'm swimming for 1 kilometer, right? So I'm swimming between 250 and 500 meters every time I get into the pool at the moment. And I'll build that up over the next 3 weeks to the point where I can swim for 1 kilometer. Then I'll have a fairly good idea if my hip has the strength and has the endurance that I need to start running. So it's informing my goal. So it's giving me more evidence that lets me know that my goal is achievable. So when I blow that up and I bring that out, that's what I'll apply throughout this whole process. Is phase 3, when I start doing running, is only to get to phase 4. Mm-hmm. And that's what keeps me from overtraining and overextending. So stage 4 would be maybe if I'm going to breaking this further down, is to get to the point where I'm running for 30 minutes. So stage 3 is only to get to stage 4. So I can't in stage 3 run stage 4. And that's what keeps you kind of going. So, and again, your performance goals within that phase actually dictate when the one phase ends and one phase begins. You can have fairly general ideas of okay, this is where I'm going to go. You might experience far quicker gains or slower gains, and you might have to adjust. But it's good to have a little bit of a blueprint of where you need to be before you go to your next phase. So the biggest challenge is just being consistent, staying healthy for a year. Staying healthy for a year, because that's what most people run into, is they'll either overtrain and they won't get it, or they'll undertrain and then have a rush to get themselves ready, and then they'll overtrain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds like it's like that. You obviously have a faith in the plan that you've laid out, and it's just a case of just ensuring that you're actually able to carry out that plan by staying within the limitations that you're giving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last question is just, One that I've asked people before and had to maybe take a bit of time to think about, but it is, if someone from, say, history or even present day that you would enjoy having a coffee and a chat with to pick their brains for advice, wisdom, just to see how their mind works, does anyone spring to mind for you?
Um, yeah, this is probably going to be very undramatic, but my godfather died suddenly about 6 years ago, and I never got a chance to like after he died. Like we had a very close relationship, but after he died, I only realized how much he loved me. And how much like I heard so many people came up to me at his funeral that I'd never met. Hey, you Conor, I've heard so much about you. I was living in Canada at the time. I flew over home. I heard so much about you, and he talked all of these things about me. He never said this stuff to me, to my face. He was very tongue in cheek, very cheeky guy, and very like he'd pull the piss out of you as soon as compliment you, right? But he was a very great character. But I realized that he was actually a complete softie, and I didn't realize it while he was living. A complete softie, and loved me very much. So I'd love to sit down with him and have a chat with him and revisit our lives and kind of keep him up to date with me and say, look, I'm after having a son. I have a wife, a lovely wife who supports me and loves me, and I'm living in Wicklow, giving him the lowdown, and I just kind of wanted to say that I loved him, and because that was one thing I was like, you know what, I was kind of, we were, when anyone dies, you get robbed of the potential times you have with that person. And Jesus, I'd give anything for an hour now to sit down and have a chat with him, So that's my person. I suppose it's not a famous figure or whatever, but that's who I would choose.
Oh, I've asked that question, and originally when I started asking that question, in my head was always that idea of a famous person or a historical figure or whatever. But actually, probably 4 or 5 times now, people have given answers that were actually family members that the wish they had more time to speak to and be able to say things to them. So I think that it speaks to a lot in itself. So I love that answer. That's us. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can go and follow along with what you're doing, and even reach out with inquiries. So go ahead and let them know.
Yeah, absolutely, Con. So like a lot of what I do is put up on my Instagram page, C O'Keeffe. So COKEEFFE. And I also have a hiking community for men, and that's crewman.ie, CRUMAN.ie, at crewman.ie for the Instagram page. And we do free hikes every month. Just get a lot of lads into the mountains together, have the crack, have fun, make connections, make friends. Especially like if people are moved to a new area and they don't have mates, or they want to get into the outdoors, they don't have friends to go to the outdoors with, come along, we'll all have the crack, we'll sit down in the middle of the mountains, have lunch together, break bread. So get involved with that. I have a podcast as well myself called Flip the Script, and season 4 of that will be starting later in the year. So if you wanted to check that out, and yeah, that's basically everything from me. And if there's anybody that listens to this and wants to reach out, just send me a DM, and it might take me a day or two. I'll always get back to you, and I'll try and we'll have an old chat.
Thanks for listening, and if you consider yourself an everyday athlete, whether you play sport or want to pursue other athletic goals, consider checking out the Everyday Athlete program at the link in the episode description. There you'll find what's involved in the program, testimonials from the lads we work with, and how to apply.